So, I had a feeling before publishing that people would generally think my review of part 1 was a bit too harsh, so I'll start out by saying, yes, I know I was really hard on Zygon Inversion, and I'd like to underline here, in case anyone was thinking otherwise, my review of part 1 was finished after having seen part 2. As I've said before, I don't like to judge a single episode of a multi-part story without having seen all of it, because for one thing, there is the very obvious reason that a second part can fill in bits that I felt were missing from part 1, and it can add some context that justifies complaints about the previous 45 minutes of what is essentially a whole story. Like, imagine sitting through the first half of a movie. You can't really judge your feelings on it because you haven't had the complete experience as intended. Can you really say if something sucks or not based on only having seen the first half? I do take this into consideration when writing my reviews, as it's very true, and I see this reason offered up quite a lot on the internet as a counter-argument when people come online and say that they have some major issues with the first part before they've seen the second part. And I do see why, and I agree with its usage to a certain extent for the aforementioned reasons, but there is a fundamental problem with using this as a counter-argument to complaints about a part 1 that's pertinent to me in this case. I'm now starting to see why the team has been scared off of doing two-parters for so long, because I am a loyal fanboy, and I will watch anything the show does, but I have to admit, I didn't bother watching part 2 of this story for 2 weeks after I watched part 1. I didn't not watch it out of spite or anything, as I'm sure people who use the word hater with a straight face will allege. I said to myself I would watch it sooner or later, but I just kept putting it off because this is a setup where you really can't afford to have a part 1 that doesn't engage your viewer. Hooking someone into a story told over 2 to 3 weeks is really quite an important aspect to the experience for the obvious reason of, can your average person or your newcomer to the show really be asked to return to a story that they're completely disinterested in? I mean, I didn't hate Zygon Invasion or anything, I was just really unenthusiastic about it. And I will note here that the context of part 2 didn't offset any of the reasons that I didn't like part 1. I felt after I saw it that all my complaints about Zygon Invasion still stood, and I really don't consider it my fault for only just barely being asked to actually watch the Zygon Inversion. So, all that being said, without any further ado, part 2 was definitely an improvement. It's not without its problems, and I felt it was significantly lacking in places, but it was progress. Though, as said, I still don't see it doing anything to improve my opinion of the first part. The primary reason that people seem to be saying to me, "No, you should watch it, Stuart, it totally makes up for Zygon Invasion," mostly appeared to be based on just how much people like the final 10 minutes, which I really don't think is a point in its favour. Like, can I really call a story that good across the board if it leaves impressing me until right near the very end? I'm kinda mixed on the Zygon Inversion, as the bulk of the runtime has a few things in it I liked that are either left half or quarter explored for no apparent reason. For example, I really enjoyed the pre-title sequence where Clara wakes up in a boarded up apartment where things aren't quite right. Everything's shot from odd angles, and the household products are strange and alien. I thought this was a really cool idea. Like, imagine spending more time here, having Clara trapped in her apartment with some sort of sinister presence watching over her. Like, maybe in a separate story, not just randomly in the second part of this one. When I first saw the inverted clock and I saw her pick up the toothpaste that says, "This is toothpaste," and it's like this black slimy stuff, I thought, holy shit, I actually really like this idea. So obviously, sequences about this fake reality just have to make up less than about 5 minutes of the runtime. This feels to me like Moffat penned this bit. I could be wrong, of course, but I think it's one of the reasons he has a co-writing credit this week, as it reminds me a lot of his earlier ideas, such as the computer world from Silence in the Library, an idea it suspiciously resembles. But the incorporation of this idea is also done in a similar way to lots of his recent episodes, in that it's one of those decent ideas that's been needlessly condensed into essentially a sketch, rather than the complete episode that it could have been. I've no idea why he decides to fold good ideas into like 5 minutes and then just go, right, that's it, ta-da! Lately, the show just seems to be under the impression that what I think is the most interesting aspect of the episode is the least interesting aspect of the episode that it can't be asked dedicating much time to. Which is fine on its own, but it's just kind of disheartening because it could have been so much more. It's like if you found a £50 note on the floor and decide to set it on fire because you think that fire is pretty. I knew that we wouldn't spend too much time here, of course, but I thought it might have been about to do something kinda interesting here. I thought this might have been a setup for us spending more time with Clara behind enemy lines. Cause she hasn't exactly had a whole lot of spotlight on her this year. She was mostly absent for 2 episodes in a row, and now she spends most of this one locked in some fucking rooms. Maybe she could have actually spent some time with the Zygons. Maybe she could meet some Zygons that have been coerced and threatened into joining the extremist faction. Or maybe she could have spent some time with some pacifist Zygons that the extremist ones are holding hostage. Maybe we could have really got inside some Zygons' heads, you know, offer some sense of perspective to the situation. Kate Stewart and everyone was banging on about how all Zygons are the same and they're all just evil last time. Maybe we could take more of a look at the other side of the coin and show how the opposing side are not as simple as they appear to be. Different Zygons have different viewpoints and motivations. Just this story had so many more opportunities for depth that it could have, and I still think should have, taken advantage of. When you're trying to call yourself a commentary with a straight face, given just how little time we spent with the Zygons themselves in this story, I just really don't think I'm unjustified in my view of this. Anyway, I was wondering what we would do now since we found Osgood at the end of last episode. What's the motivation for the story going to be now? And it turns out it's a literal mystery box.
And what am I going to find? What's in the Osgood box?
Keep watching to find out. Come on, viewer, you want the carrot on a stick, don't you? Alright, me being a bit of a snarky bellend, yes, because I did enjoy the middle 20 minutes or so as they were playing out. I liked Osgood and the Doctor's back and forth. If Osgood's going to continue being a long-running fixture of the show, she has been in dire need of an episode where she's there for pretty much the whole runtime. So, yeah, I will give it that much at least. Anyway, so Evil Clara, who is still really good by the way, is looking for the mystery box, while the Doctor and Osgood are looking for Evil Clara, and they accidentally run into... What's this? Precisely who this story should have spent a fuck lot more time with? So, last time I spent pretty much my entire review banging on about us missing some kind of human connection and how the political commentary it's trying to give would only work if we had some more of a sense of a scale of the problem and the stakes. Because the Doctor's opposing argument to the groupthink that Kate Stewart is under the impression Zygons operate under, and how most of them want to live in peace, was just a couple of lines of dialogue and wasn't nearly enough to be called insightful on its own. So here, what we've got is a pacifist, a Zygon who wants no part in this war. He's caught in the middle of this conflict. He's not on anyone's side. He just wants to live his normal life. He should have been central to this story, or at the very least an important part of it. But he's not. While this scene was really good in my opinion, the fact that 1, we saw no one like this last week to justify its political commentary, which was much more important than anyone seems to have realised, and 2, he dies immediately after he gets a decent amount of screen time. Okay, yes, the fact he's here at all does count for something, but I just didn't think it was nearly enough. And it didn't make up for just how little the last episode did to draw me into its world and get me actually feeling something. It just felt like this element was just sort of thrown in there for balance's sake rather than being considered important, which it really, really was. And given just how much of this story you could have cut out to make room for some more connection to the people caught in the middle of the breaking off of the extremist Zygon faction, the innocent lives at stake because of your antagonists... Really, am I the only one who felt this element was so much more important than this? Please tell me I'm not the only one. I don't know, just maybe extremism and ISIS are just too cavernous a well for Nuhu to dig into, given just how massive the issues surrounding them are. I've got no problem with attempting something like this. As I said last time, I do back this idea on a conceptual level, but if we were going to attempt something like this at all, this element of the story really should have consisted of more than just the odd line of dialogue last time and a whopping 5-minute scene just sort of thrown in the middle of this one. Okay, back to the positive. I'll tell you one thing that did make me laugh out loud, the flashback showing how Kate Stewart got out of the cliffhanger from last time, because I just remembered the long pretentious explanation of the resolution of the cliffhanger from the beginning of which is familiar, and compared it with Kate's amazingly intricate way that she got out of that one last time, which was... I shot a gun at the bad guy and he died. I'm not sure if they intended to make me think, ooh, that was cold, or piss myself laughing, but compare the two and it's actually really funny.
Unfortunately, his teleporter is out of power. Also unfortunate, he's being stalked by, say, about 50 android assassins.
He uses the energy wave from the android weapons to recharge the teleport bracelet, and at the exact moment he's supposed to disintegrate, he actually teleports.
Anyway, I did actually like the occasional conversations that we had between evil Clara and regular Clara. Jenna Coleman's actually getting a lot better as an actress, and I am still rooting for her to get some good work off the back of her time in Doctor Who, so that is something in the episode's favour. Christ, do I like Clara now or don't I? Stop fucking doing this to me, Harness. Maybe that's why I have a grudge against his Doctor Who work. I'm in my rut, damn it. Getting out is too difficult now. Anyway, so... Oh, Christ, the monologue. Okay, the final confrontation scene in the Black Archive where the Doctor has to talk Kate Stewart and evil Clara down from mutually assured destruction. I've seen this bit widely praised by lots of people. Some are going as far as to call this rant possibly Capaldi's defining scene, which I counter with the end of Mummy on the Orient Express, and before I go further, I will admit, yes, Capaldi really gave it his all, seemed really into it, and was really impressive. And broadcasting this the day before Remembrance Sunday made a lot of sense. And I enjoyed it for what it was while it was playing out. Capaldi does angry really well, and he does give you some chills towards the end of it as he starts talking about the Time War. And please believe me here, I do really hate to piss all over everyone's parade, and I will agree that aesthetically speaking, it is a great speech. Narratively, though, about halfway through, it started to get a bit wearing. And I could see how some people outside of us Whovians could label it preachy and start going, yes, Doctor, we get it already. You can stop now. 'Cause you've literally got the Doctor screaming the episode's point in our faces for 10 minutes. Like, if you got a message to deliver, that's not necessarily a problem, and I am behind this one, and alright, call me being too harsh here all you want, but shouldn't we be hiding said message a bit more effectively behind the narrative, rather than just having the characters flat out say it? I mean, it's a more believable setup than the literal pro-life, pro-choice debate we had in the second half of Kill the Moon, which totally shattered the fourth wall into a million pieces with a fucking sledgehammer, but... he is essentially just saying the point while other characters intermittently say the odd 8 words here and there. All I'm saying here is, while yes, it's a pretty speech, it's just a bit of a basic approach to getting a message across, ain't it? And then the Doctor starts ranting about how war is a very bad thing, and that nobody should do it because people die, and people dying is sad. And I was like, wow, Doctor, that is like such a message. I always thought people dying was a happy thing. Like, every Doctor Who fan should have that on a poster. Everybody stop fighting each other, because war is like bad and stuff. Oh my god, that is so deep, Doctor. Let me get a ruler and measure just how deep that sentiment was. Oh my god, 97 centimetres?
What we're saying is that war makes people dead instead of being still alive instead.
I also think I would have preferred it if evil Clara had had a bit more interaction with the Doctor here. The scene was just sort of like, shut up everyone, the Doctor's about to say something impressive. Like, for a character that had felt intimidating and imposing in her previous scenes, evil Clara just doesn't really spend that much time trying to rationalise her position here. That's what makes a villain so scary and intimidating. They genuinely believe what they're doing is right because of insert reason here.
What is it that you actually want?
War.
I mean, it's fine for what it is, I guess, but again, I was just left wanting so much more. It's just a bit basic. I mean, yeah, alright, the end of the episode does have some decent stabs at symbolism in there. Revealing this scenario has happened a bunch of times and everyone's memories have been erased every time. Which is sort of saying something about how cyclical war is, how similar situations play out every time and man appears to be incapable of learning from his mistakes. As said, yes, aesthetically, it's a great scene. It's just that it's kind of held up by duct tape and rubber bands. All in all, this story as a whole was a jumble of decent ideas that I was just never really convinced by. I'm not against the show being political, but I just thought it was way too heavy-handed and missing quite a lot of what it needed to achieve its full potential.